I will bet there's no shortage of things happening in your church. Kids ministry, students, groups, outreaches, special events, the list probably goes on. Keeping communication clear across it all can be exhausting. With Church Copy AI, you can turn a simple event description into a complete communication package. Emails, posts, texts, and more, all working together to create awareness, build anticipation, and provide follow-up. And it's all organized in one place, in your church's voice. You can get started for free at churchcopy.ai/unstuck. That's churchcopy.ai/unstuck. Well, welcome to the Unstuck Church podcast. I'm Sean, your host, and I'm joined as always by Amy Anderson. Amy, not that anyone listening to the podcast can know this today, but we're wearing matching blue shirts. We're color coordinated.
It looks pretty good.
It looks like we planned this, but maybe it's just the synergy in this podcast series. This is actually the final episode in our 4-part series called Management is Not a Dirty Word. And before we get into the content today, Amy, I know you've been traveling recently. I wonder if you just have any fun, encouraging stories from the road and working with churches.
Yes, I have. I got to spend this week with a church in Worcester, Ohio, and Grace Church. Great church. Love that team. But what's fun about it is I was there, I can't believe it, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I came in and they went through a process with us and I did the staffing and structure component, and just how fun to go back and see that team in action. You know, they have grown, health has increased, just so many things up and to the right. They're at the pinnacle of the church life cycle. They're up in sustained health. Their Unstuck Teams assessment was awesome. And they're a multi-site church now. So they're just trying to, what we've been talking about, how do we now get structured and prepared for the run that God has for us next? So it was great to see Pastor Nick there. He's been a friend for years.
That's great. I love to hear that. It's so fun to engage with churches that, I mean, a decade later, we get to get back and work with them and see the progress that they have made and God has made there. So that's really fun. Well, today we're wrapping up by discussing how to effectively train and develop managers on your team. I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. Amy, why is this such an important topic for churches to end our series with?
Yeah, well, as we talked about, I think it was in the very first episode of this series, many of us in ministry are responsible for leading other people, right? A lot of us who are leading other people probably got into that role because we were a high performer with high character. In other words, we were doing good at our doing role. And we were recognized and then given this bigger leadership role. But being promoted to leading other people doesn't mean you actually have the skills of being a good manager. And management is something just like any other specialty. It needs to be trained and developed. And the good news is there are just so many resources out there on this topic. But Sean, historically, churches just have not been good developer of managers within their teams. They haven't leaned into the resources and the trainings. And maybe it's because management, again, like metrics, can sound too corporate or too impersonal. But I really feel like it's time to change that. Without great managers, we will not accomplish great things. And I want our listeners and their churches to accomplish great things. So that's why I want to talk about this today.
I love that. All right. Well, let's get to it. Let's start with the common mistakes you see churches making when it comes to training their managers. What have you seen there?
Yeah, I think, Sean, they honestly just don't think about it. I think they assume people know how to lead their teams like it's a given. Like if Joe's a great employee, again, strong character, strong chemistry with others, he's winning in his role, and then he's promoted to lead people. I just don't think they think about that new responsibility he needs to be trained in. In fact, Sean, it kind of reminds me, did you ever read the E-Myth Revisited?
I did. That's a great book. Yeah.
It's a great book. And if you're not familiar with the book, to our listeners, there's a story in there about a gal named Sarah who loves to make pies. And in a sense, everyone told her, your pies are the best. You should open your own pie store. And she resisted it for a while, but then she did. And at first she was super excited. She spent her days, baking pies, serving customers, running the shop. But over time, she got overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And here's why. She was trained to be a specialist. She was what they call a technician. She was the one who loves the actual work of baking pies, right? Or in church world, I love preaching sermons. I love designing graphics. I love teaching kids. I like making hospital visits. Those are
Mm-hmm.
the specialists, the technicians. Then the book talks about the next level of the manager. These are the people who develop people and processes and bring order and clarity to everything. And that's something Sarah just was never trained to do. She
Yeah.
dove in and did her best, but she didn't have the training. And then they talk about that entrepreneur, the leader, visionary, kind of who Lance Witt talked about in the first week of this series. Those are the people, typically the senior pastor, who have more capacity to dream, innovate, answer where are we going? How can we do
Mm-hmm.
all this? So now, could someone like Sarah thrive as a manager? Maybe. But the skills and training that got her to be a great specialist in baking pies has an entirely different skill set that takes to manage, in her case, a business. Those are new
Sure.
skills. So
Yeah.
similarly, promoting a specialist into a manager role at our churches requires a new set of skills, which
Mm-hmm.
most of us, I don't think we have. So
Yeah.
my first answer there was all under the umbrella. I don't think we think about it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. And
Yeah.
because we don't think about it, churches typically don't provide any training. It's just kind
Mm-hmm.
of sink or swim. We throw them into the deep end and honestly assume they'll figure it out. Not like
Mm-hmm.
anything bad or evil there. We literally assume they're going to figure this thing out. And if they have an entrepreneurial leader in the seat, that leader might actually think, well, that's how they'll learn. Just give them the job and they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
So, and then now there are probably some churches, well, I hope there are, that do have things like new manager training programs, and that's a really good thing. My only maybe pushback on that is, do you have intentional systems for ongoing manager development?
Yeah.
Developing this skill set of leading, managing people, it's continuous learning. You're
Mm-hmm.
building those muscles over time. I think back, Sean, to my first management role, which was in corporate America. But I remember having a lot of clarity on what type of manager I did not want to be when they moved
Mm-hmm.
me into this role. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to be mean. I'm not going to act like I'm better than everybody else. I'm not going to hide in my office. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
this expectation of the things that I will never do that some
Yeah.
other bad manager did when I was on another team. And I think, without training, that's how people like me, we can form our management style, which by the way is very limiting, right?
Mm.
Without
Yeah.
intention, new managers often just default to what they don't want to be rather than be taught what they do want to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Amy, most of us are wired up with a natural bent towards focusing more on tasks or focusing more on relationships, right? And
Yep.
and you see this all the time in the assessment work we do with church teams. And without training, we typically end up managing people according to those natural tendencies and our natural wiring. So, could you talk about why good manager training is so crucial to building a culture of both health and high performance on a church staff?
Well, yeah, what you're saying is that some of us are people who tip towards wanting to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And as a manager without training, I might focus too much, right, on getting stuff done and not paying attention to the relational side of the people on our team. And likewise, for those of us that tip towards people, we might focus way too much on happiness, peaceful relationships,
Right.
fun, and take our eye off the ball when it comes to actually getting work done and moving the ball forward. So here's what every manager needs to remember. You have to do both. You have to lead a high performing team and you have to do it in the context of relationships. So if you are like me and if you're wired more relationally, you have to get over this fear of pushing for results and bringing clarity to goals. Sometimes we feel that's too corporate or unspiritual, but great
Right.
managers set expectations and then they help their people accomplish it. And this was my story. I had to learn to get comfortable with the headier side of management. It wasn't natural for me to think in the form of goals and accountability. And when there was conflict or issues that I needed to move in on, I was much more apt to avoid those conversations early on, and just wanted to avoid it and make sure everyone was still happy. So I kind of thought my job was to keep people happy, which obviously is wrong.
Right.
And then, Sean, if you have the wiring to get stuff done and get results, you're going to have to learn the art of relating to people,
Right.
valuing hearing their stories and experiences. And if you're leading a people person, you're going to need to slow down and make room for the relational side. And Sean, I'm just curious because this is your wiring. What ways have
is.
you had to adapt over the years if you've led people as you sat in that manager seat?
Yeah, it absolutely is my wiring. And there's a few things that come to mind. First of all, I got what I would call just an image coach. So I actually had someone on our team who had permission to tell me what I looked like, and I had resting pastor face. You know
You
what I mean?
did. I do.
I needed to raise my eyebrows. I needed to look a little more happy and engaged because I could just look so serious and so focused on the task at hand that I didn't look like I was having any fun at the end of the day. And I was. But
Mhm.
accomplishing the task is fun for me. So I needed an image coach who's someone who could just tell me, hey, you need to kind of brighten up your appearance and what you're communicating physically. That was a big help. The other thing I'd say is I had to learn to lead with questions with my team. Sometimes if you're
Mhm.
task focused, you can do a lot of telling. I needed to get better at asking questions. So questions like, how can I help? What do you need from me? What can I do to support you? Those were important questions for me to have and
Mhm.
ask my teammates because it positioned me as a support for them. And really, I was. But at the end of the day, I could tilt more towards that task focus. So asking
Mhm.
questions was important. I knew that I had to create time for our team to not be focused on the task also. So I'm not the bringer of fun like you are, Amy, but I could have some people on our team help bring the fun who were good at that. And I could give us space for having fun. For we would do things like let's go bowling, let's go catch a movie, let's grab some
Mhm.
coffee. Just those little things helped us galvanize as a team. And then I'd say the last thing I had to do is I had to get good at recognizing great work. You know,
Say more about
I'm
that.
I'm wired up as a discerner. So if you think
Mhm.
about Working Genius, I'm an ID invention discerner, and whether I'm right or not, I've usually already discerned whether I did the task well or not. I
Mhm.
don't need anyone to tell me that I did a good job. I've either determined I did it well or I didn't. And sometimes I can actually project that onto others. Not
Gotcha.
everyone is wired up that way. And so I had to get good at just recognizing you did a great job. That was phenomenal. You hit a home run and saying that to others, even though that wasn't necessarily something I expected to
Mhm.
hear at the end of the day.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sean. I think the less effective manager expects everybody on their team to adapt to their style, where the
Yeah.
outstanding manager is the one who understands the differences on their team and adapts their style so they can bring
Hmm.
out the very best in them. That's what you're kind of giving
That's
an
good.
example of. And there
Yeah.
are tools you threw out Working Genius, right? There's the DISC
Hmm.
assessment, Working Genius, Strength Finders, Enneagram. There's so many. Um, Pick one. I think these types of assessments, they always give people visibility to the differences and the diversity of skill sets and wirings on the team.
Yeah.
Managers need to be trained to understand these differences if they're really going to bring out the best, both from a health and a performance side with these guys. And
Yeah.
as I
That's right.
mentioned a few weeks ago, at the end of the day, yes, management is about bringing clarity to expectations, uh, but it's also about developing systems. But we
Hmm.
cannot forget that it's about developing your team. As the
Mm.
leader of the team, a big part of your job is to bring out the very best in the people God has entrusted into your care. So, to do that well, we need to improve the art of being a good manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you that everyone running an organization wants more people who are skilled at bringing out the best in others, right?
Yep.
Amy, what specific disciplines or maybe practices should church leaders implement to better train the managers on their team?
Yeah, first I would say get time scheduled on your calendar for it. This is work that you have to plan. You need to make it a priority and put it on your calendar. And that can look different for different teams and probably depends on how much training you provided up to this point. If this is an entirely new muscle, you might want to kick off the training with like a 1 day offsite for all the staff leaders you have that are managing other people. If you already have some training and you just need to nurture it, many churches do like quarterly trainings for their managers, like the fifth Sunday of, or I'm sorry,
Hmm.
the fifth Monday of every month or Wednesday,
Hmm.
fill in the blank. 4 times a year, we get a fifth one in there.
Yeah.
Um, so that would be the first, if it's entirely new. Also, I would say you want to put someone in charge of creating this development roadmap. So get it scheduled and then name a leader who's going to be thinking holistically about what we need to do to develop our managers.
Mm.
While the senior leadership team can give input, they might even have decision rights in it. Someone has to own the responsibility of getting the training plan developed. There needs to
Yeah.
be a captain. Everybody can't own this. And then that leader, they need to think through the what and the how. Like, what are the most important topics or tools that our team needs related to manager training? And then how should we deliver that training? So I would just say, from my purview, here's some common what needs to be trained. What are some of the top management training needs? I'd say the first one is how to give feedback. And we did an entire podcast on this topic.
Yeah.
It's that important. Managers need to understand how to praise people, how to have hard conversations. The second would be most church teams, church managers need training on how to develop people. Managers need to be trained on how to assess people's performance and then learn how to coach them up. And the third, I would say, is just how to lead a team. Things like how to have an effective one-on-one, how to have effective meetings, how to lead through conflict. So once you determine what the what's are for your organization, I would make a long list, prioritize them, and then if you do a one-day offsite, you should be able to cover a lot of good training over that day. And then, of course, that you're not done then. Now it's the senior leaders, who need to nurture and develop their managers to ensure the principles that you covered on this one day are being implemented throughout the organization. So that would be a bit of a roadmap if this is a new muscle for a church. Now, here's some ideas around like how you can train your managers. And by the way, feel free to jump in, Sean. But I would start by having some required reading. We have so many amazing authors who have already written all this stuff up. This is not new. In fact, it keeps getting more refined. Have some required reading and then have someone facilitate the content so people know how to filter the concept through your church's filter. So a couple of examples of books. The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. It was written forever ago, but it's brilliant at helping managers understand how to do 1 minute praisings, 1 minute reprimands, 1 minute goals. Or The Ideal Team Member. If you need to learn how to better kind of coach and develop your teams, I would look at The Ideal Team Member or Team Player. I always say that wrong. By Patrick Lencioni. That helps with assessing performance.
Yeah.
John Maxwell, The 5 Levels of Leadership. That's helping your managers understand how to increase their influence. Or, of course, High Impact Teams by Lance Witt. Again, these are all books that you can read some chapters together and then talk about it with your managers. And that's where maybe it's a monthly brown bag lunch where you're reading together and processing things. Figure out the what and then figure out the best how. Another way to do this, another how, is to bring an expert in to do the training. In the Twin Cities here, when I was in management, there were flyers all the time, different things. You could either bring an expert in to get training on this, or you can go to an expert to get the training. And then, you can also leverage your senior leadership team or key staff leaders to train in an area they're great at. So Sean, if you were on our executive team, you might put together some content for managers to understand goal setting, budgets, all of that. I might do it on how to adapt your style, to increase your influence. But you can, this is what we did at our church. We just took about 4 or 5 of us who put together a 6-session kind of cohort and rotated our managers through all of those cohorts over the course of the year. And by the end of the year, we're all talking the same language. We're all learning from one another. So anything you would add to that?
I love that. Yeah, I was thinking back to my story, and some of my best learnings came from just watching good managers. And I'd encourage you to bring your team alongside of your best managers. Who are the people who seem to have the best balance of health and performance on their teams? What does their meeting rhythm look like? And what do their personal conversations look like and sound like? Put some of those developing managers in the room with them while they lead their team. Sometimes management is better caught than taught. And I just know that I learned a lot about healthy conversations, healthy team leadership and management from watching others who did it well. So
that's great.
Amy, what are some maybe markers or evidences that you've seen on a team that can tell you your managers have been trained well and are developing?
Yeah. I think with these types of teams, these good managers, you just sense a culture of high team morale, right? Team members feel safe to speak up. They share ideas. They admit mistakes. They demonstrate real care to one another beyond just the job and the work roles. You get a sense of a higher level of enjoyment accomplishing the work together. I think another indicator is that your teams are actually getting their important work done. This is
Mm,
because everyone knows the priorities and how their work aligns to the bigger picture. Good communication is happening through effective meetings and effective one on ones, and goals are clear. Teams
hmm.
are celebrating the known wins now, right? And they're collaborating on new ideas when goals aren't met. And lastly, because tied to that a lot, I think you see, especially in ministry teams, right? That's what we're talking about, ministry leaders. I think you see an increase in the spiritual vibrancy on the team. I think good management provides more visibility to the work.
Yeah.
And out of that, I think there's more natural prayer as teams discuss what God is doing, right? Through them and
Hmm.
through their team. And, I will say this, as I'm sharing this, this doesn't need to all be subjective, right? If you're trying to
Mm,
figure out, do we have good management? I would
yeah.
actually encourage you to use a tool to help you get the real pulse of how your organization is doing. At the Unstuck group, we use a Teams assessment we created to help you evaluate and see how your organization is doing related to the personal health of the team health, the personal performance, the team performance, and then their perspectives on organizational systems and culture.
Yeah.
I know that there's a much, much more robust best Christian workplace if you want to go deeper and broader on all of that
Hmm.
stuff. But
Hmm.
whatever you choose, I say take it once a year, especially if you're at the very top of the food chain at your church. If you're the lead pastor or executive, you might be missing the real view of how your team is feeling and doing.
Yeah.
So it'll just
Yeah.
give you feedback on how your management practices are working.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, how can church leaders create more sustainable systems for ongoing management develop things that they can sustain
Yeah.
throughout the year?
This is why I go back to you have to have a leader or a champion, because we can splash in something big every once in a while, but you're
Yeah.
right. The we want this to be ongoing and sustainable. So someone's got to figure out what's the right rhythm for your church with their training. So you've
Hmm.
got to build regular training into your calendar. Again, you don't just try to drift and hope it happens. Get it
Yeah.
on the calendar. And I think, again, quarterly if you've already got some stuff established, but I do it more frequently if this is a new muscle, like those
Hmm.
brown bag lunches or an offsite. The second thing I think to create sustainable systems is just to create a clear expectations, like in a framework for
Hmm.
what good management looks like here. Clear expectations around how we do one-on-ones.
Yeah.
If we're managing performance, how do we lead through a performance management process? Like those things I've seen churches include. Man, we pray for anyone that we're putting on performance plans, every day for two
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah.
How to manage conflict. Here's how we handle conflict, or manage the triangulation that can happen. So
Yeah.
somehow, you don't need a policy book. You just need some guidelines and creating a picture of the kind of management culture you want at your church. And the last thing I would say for it to be sustainable is just you have to invest resources in this area.
Hmm.
We have to remember personnel is typically the biggest budget item for our church, and people are our most important asset.
Right.
So use some planned resources, dollars, to invest into the managers of your organization.
Yeah. Well, that's how you'll know it's really important to you. If there's budget
Hmm.
behind it, then it'll have a high level of importance. That's good.
Yep.
Okay, so let's say a church leader they're listening to us today. They realize we need to improve in this area. What are some
Hmm.
practical, maybe first steps that they can start to
Hmm.
take?
All right. So first steps is so unstuck, Sean, but I think you should do some assessment,
It's the
right?
right
If
place
this
to
is
start.
new, I would start by taking an assessment like I just mentioned a few minutes ago. You can take the Unstuck Teams assessment or again, pick another one. But I
Hmm.
just think this will give you a chance to hear from your organization, not just the leaders of your teams, right? We want to
Yeah,
get a full perspective. In fact, Sean, I'm thinking about it. Last week on our episode on metrics, we gave our listeners a coupon code for
we
free
did.
access to the
Yep.
Unstuck Learning Hub for 1 month so they could take the vital signs assessment, get to
Hmm.
know their numbers. Well, if they have free access for a month to the Learning Hub, they also have access to the Unstuck Teams assessment. So listeners,
That's awesome.
that's a win-win. No excuse for not taking an
That's
assessment.
that's what we call a two for none right
That's
there.
right.
Two for none.
Assessment's always the first step. And then again, the assessment results will give you some clear ideas on where you need to be in training for your managers. It will reveal if they feel goals are clear, if they feel there are development gaps going on, if your meetings are effective or not. We ask 73 questions. And as you see the results of each question, you will definitely see the themes that come up that
Yeah.
you'll want to train on first. And then the second part of that after you assess is just put some time to put a plan together. Put
Yep.
together a plan to train your managers, which is what I talked about earlier. Those would
Yep.
be the first steps.
Perfect. I love that. Well, Amy, when I was leading in a local church, this series would have been invaluable for me. It's been a really good one. So, any final thoughts before we wrap up the series?
Yeah, thanks for hanging with us. I love this topic. I hope there's been a nugget or two in there for you. But out in like the corporate world, there's a common phrase that people don't quit companies, they quit managers. And I actually agree with that. But let me flip it for our ministry leaders. I would also say that people stay, grow, and give their very best because of great managers. A great manager creates clarity, builds trust, brings out the best in people, and they don't just manage tasks, they shape the culture, and culture is what drives results in our ministry. So, as we talked about earlier, most ministry leaders were promoted because of their great doer specialist role, not because they automatically knew how to lead. That's like asking your best player to coach the team, right? Without giving them a playbook or training them. Training managers, and again, it's not an expense, it's an investment. It reduces turnover. It boosts performance for the ministry. It prevents burnout. And it honestly turns average teams into high-performing teams. When you train a manager, you don't just impact one person, you impact every person on the team, and that ripple effect can transform your team. So if you want to lead a healthy and high-performing team, start by training your managers, because when managers get better, everybody gets better.
Love it. I love it. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Like Amy just mentioned, and we talked about last week, we're offering our listeners 1 free month of access to the Unstuck Learning Hub, where you can take the Vital Signs assessment and the Unstuck Teams assessment and dig into some of the metrics and some of the measurements on the team side. So just go to the unstuckgroup.com/learning hub to sign up and use the coupon code VITALSIGNS at checkout. So coupon code VITALSIGNS. You can catch any of the episodes that you missed at the unstuckgroup.com/podcast. And visit the unstuckgroup.com to learn more about how we help pastors lead unstuck churches. We'll see you next week.